We're lucky enough to have Judi Earl, a pasture ecologist out of Coolatai, New South Wales. And yeah, today we're going to have a yarn about our upcoming course, what we've been creating, what Judi's done in her history and her extensive experience out on the ranges and out farming. So really excited to sort of go back in time a little bit, Judi, and you know, how did we get here, and I'd really like to dive into your journey a little bit today.
For sure, Dad. As you said, I'm a consultant, grazier and educator based here in Coolatai, northern New South Wales. So I basically born and bred in Sydney, grew up in Sydney, and I wasn't very good at school, so I I spent a few years running around chasing racehorses and working on horse studs for a while, and then I decided after a while to go back and try school again and try to get into vet science, specifically equine veterinary studies. So that path took me to UNE, and I did a rural science degree there, and that's where I came across Christine Jones for the first time, and also in the process, because around the New England area, there are a lot of early adopters in terms of cell grazing, the RCS graduates and holistic management graduates. So because the path to veterinary science didn't work out, I ended up finishing the rural science degree and did well enough to get into a PhD program, basically studying pasture ecology with Christine Jones as my supervisor. And so essentially it was a pretty applied research project, working with three of the early adopters in cell grazing and looking at the effects of grazing management on pastures and soils, essentially. So that was how that all happened. Yeah. So as I said, it was pretty applied, and I guess it was those connections that allowed me to go straight into consultancy after I finished the PhD. So
and just to set us in time here, Judi, what year are we talking here?
So I finished, I completed my PhD in 1998. So it was 8 years study between the undergraduate and the PhD. Mm-hmm. And I applied for a few jobs, but I didn't like the idea of working on other people's projects. So a bit pig-headed that way. Essentially, as soon as I finished the PhD, I did a little bit of traveling around and came back and set up the consultancy, AIMS, mm-hmm. Agricultural Information and Monitoring Services, with Lewis Kahn. So that was at the end of 1998. So wow. We've been running the consultancy ever since, and Lewis, I was in partnership with Lewis for most of that time. Just in the last couple of years, he's taken a different path. So these days I'm flying solo. So it was, it was towards the end of 2010, I decided to put the principles that we've been talking about in terms of the consultancy and the like into practice. And so I bought 1,000 acres out here at Coolatai towards the end of 2010, and unfortunately the seasons haven't been that kind, but I think I'm on the path to making the improvements. So it's essentially totally beef cattle, or it is at least so far. Yeah. But the primary objective really is to use those animals, those livestock, as the primary tool to regenerate the land. So yeah, I think things are on the right track, in spite of whatever it was, the worst drought in history a few years ago, and there hasn't been that many even average years since in the last 10. So
and so what would an average year look like then, Judi, for you out there?
So the conditions, it's just on the western side of the tableland, so towards the slopes. Mm-hmm. The average rainfall is historically about 700 mils. Yeah. some are dominant.
Yeah.
So but it's this year, the last 12 months has really really turned around, and probably the best conditions that I've had since I've been here. So
Incredible.
it's showing up some nice changes, which is really encouraging. So I still haven't restocked to the extent that I'd like to, but we're still making
Bloody
progress.
awesome. That's so you're out there on country now, putting it all into practice, and you're starting to see some results. So I guess that's a pretty important point to note, really, is that these things don't happen overnight, do they? You know,
for sure. It's really is. I mean, I think progress can be made regardless of environment, but certainly having those favourable seasons goes a long way to accelerating the process, and particularly that all-important factor of rainfall. So
and so have you seen the properties around? Have they had the same response, or is your property just being better sort of primed and ready for this rain event?
Yeah, it's a bit hard to say, David. There are some places that are looking quite good, but there are equally just as many places, not only here locally, but I've just come back from the Hunter Valley. You know, there's lots of places that are, you know, almost, depending on how you define drought, but they're almost back in drought, you know, in terms of low herbage mass and too many animals on the land and those sort of thing, you know. And because for all of that area, you know, growth is not going to occur now really until we get into spring, and so there's a lot of places that have gone back to you know, very short pasture cover, which is a bit unfortunate, but anyway.
Well, I guess that's why we're hopefully here to change a few things then and get some better information out.
Absolutely, yeah. Hopefully it can encourage some change in terms of practices, but yeah, it's a slow process.
And I mean, already, like you say, we're seeing the ship turn around, aren't we? I mean, you know better than me, being in the space for over 20 years or so, but you know, even our short time, you know, 5 years or so, just tiptoeing into this regenerative ag and agriculture, or more holistic based agriculture, we're seeing a change also, like, and so it's a really exciting time, I guess, for you also to be in the space, and finally, hopefully the tide is turning.
Yeah, you can hope. Certainly, I think that the drought really knocked a lot of people around, and you know, there's been enough stories out there of people that have really managed it well, and have come out the other side, you know, in pretty good shape. And I think, you know, after a while, people start to look over the fence and can see, you know, that there is, for want of a better term, method in the madness, which is it was considered quite mad sort of 20 years ago. But yeah, it has really, I think the conditions have really sparked a lot of interest in the regenerative movement, if you like, and regenerative practices, and just, you know, the importance of maintaining soil health and looking after the land, and when you do that, the repayment comes in no small way.
And it keeps compounding on itself, doesn't it? Instead of just extracting and mining the system, you're seeing that.
Yeah, and I think that certainly has been the philosophy that we've had with AIMS, you know, for the last 20 years, is really trying to build capacity in the landscape. And if you focus on building health in the landscape and actually manage to encourage persistence and resilience in the land, then it is achievable. And that's primarily using grazing livestock as the main tool.
Yeah, I'd love to, I guess, turn a bit off your experience now and dive into the cows a little bit, if you're up for it, and and yeah, what you're seeing, and how you're managing, and what's different about what you're doing out there.
Yeah, so I guess the main thing, as I said, is actually really a focus on using the livestock to regenerate the land, to improve the health of the land. So I think when I started here, whatever it was, a bit over 10 years ago now, I just bought 50 old cows and they had calves on them. You know, in terms of breeds, you mentioned a breed. I think I had one represented in those 50. They're multicolored, and there was quite a bit of yak in them, which I have certainly come to appreciate and love. That little bit of Bos Indicus really helps in the tougher country, particularly. They're just so adaptable, and also relatively easy to manage. I think they're lovely. They quieten down really easily. So yes, the idea was to just buy some animals that were adapted to the environment, but also they had to be relatively quiet, because I'd say the vast majority of what I do out here, I do alone. I've obviously had from help from time to time, but mostly I'm here on my own, so they've got to be quiet, and yeah, pretty easy care. So I try not to interfere too much. You know, the actual yard work or whatever is minimal. I was drenching early on, but I don't have any drenching program now. There's no program of vaccination. I really try and focus on nutrition to keep their health optimal. Obviously, you know, from time to time there is some interference or other treatments required, but I really try to keep that to a minimum. I try and employ, as far as possible, low stress stock handling techniques. Probably not necessarily by the book, but most of the activities are fairly low stress for me and the stock. I just, you know, however long it takes to do anything or move animals, you know, it just takes that long. So there's no rush, and everything's done pretty quietly and calmly, and they have access to supplement pretty well year round. They take it more or less, you know, as the seasons change and the feed quality changes. And I can very happily say, I think over the last 12 months nearly, the need for supplement has just about non-existent. You know, it's gone right down.
So no need for vaccinations. You're not using any sort of worming or drenching, and you're also not supplementing because of their nutrition. Is that, well, you are supplementing, but you're seeing less of a.
Yeah.
So as we say, that's that compounding power, isn't it, of regenerative systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So since the drought broke, the amount of native legume in the pasture has just exploded. So the need for protein supplement has really reduced. The diversity of pasture species that are present. So I've pretty much started with a monoculture of coulotai grass, which is not considered particularly desirable. And I consider that that's probably close to half of what it was. So there's a whole raft of other species that have now come in. So that diversity of pasture and diversity of diet, the animals are they seem really healthy. They're never what I would call sort of over fat, but they're well covered. They're shiny. They're happy. So the growth rates and weaning weights have improved out of sight. No problems with calving. So when I started, I had lots of retained afterbirth, which was mostly mineral deficiency. And the worming program, because I started with 9 paddocks, I'm now up to 63 what I call permanent paddocks, but that can be subdivided further. So they're only really impacting on any particular area, maybe 2 or 3 times max in a 12-month period. So it really reduces the need for any worm control.
So that's a real long rest period then.
Generally, yeah. There's a really long recovery period between graze events, and certainly I expect long enough to break any life cycle of common parasites.
Amazing. I must say, when we received the footage back from the filming of the course, I just was blown away by your property and how how lush and just big the growth was. It was incredible. And like you say, you could just see the cows, how calm they were. Like, they weren't worried about anything. Like, they were just so calm, and it was amazing to see. So.
Usually that's the case, David.
When they're well fed.
That's how I like them to be. Yeah.
Of course, it never goes all that way.
Not always, no.
Yeah. Nah, sensational. So that means that you were running around then in the early days with, I guess, can we talk a little bit about how that sort of holistic management came to be in Australia? I know, was it
sure.
Bruce Ward and came out? Yeah.
Yep. So the timing was really quite good. I think I was starting on my PhD studies in 1994, and actually remember going to I think it was a Society for Animal Production meeting at UNE, and Bruce Ward was speaking. He was, I think, that week leaving to go over to the States to start his holistic management educator training with Alan Savory.
Wow.
And so he was speaking on the same program, and I was speaking about my plans for my research project. So I met Bruce, I think, pretty much at day one.
At the start of it all, yeah.
Yeah. So, but as I said, I think when I was doing my my undergrad degree, I was staying on the property of some friends from way back, and they had just completed an RCS program, Grazing for Profit. So they were really early adopters in terms of the cell grazing. So that was in the early 1990s, 91 or 92, I think it was. So Terry McCosker had just done his Churchill Fellowship with Stan Parsons, and I think I think there might have been a group of 10 or 12 people that did that very first course with Terry, and so the majority of them were around the Northern Tablelands, around Armidale. So
Stop the
I
road.
got to meet those people, and of course, Derek Smith was one of them, if not the first course, one of the early courses, and of course the association with Christine Jones. So Chris was doing some work with Tim Wright at Lana, with Balala, the Balala Brushgrove Land Care Group. So she had started a research project on Lana, and I was fortunate enough to provide some technical assistance on that project. So that's back in the last century, 1990s. So I sort of feel like I've had some association with cell grazing, the RCS group, Grazing for Profit, and holistic management pretty much from the time it arrived in Australia. So
absolutely, from day one. That's
pretty
incredible,
much.
and that was sort of my understanding. But I just really wanted to know how it all came about.
So essentially, my research, my PhD thesis, I called it, based it on cell grazing, but only because it's really hard to actually do a research project around holistic management, because holistic management is such a personal practice. So I was really looking at the grazing technology, which was cell grazing at the time. So it's sort of evolved from there, and then of course I think it was 2002 before I gathered up the resources to actually complete the holistic management educator training myself. So I've been a holistic management educator since 2002, and essentially, throughout, that sort of is infused in all of the consultancy that I do, as well as the practice here on the farm, but also just day to day. It really is an empowering process, to have have that clear holistic goal to work towards, to understand what you can control, and what's out of your control. And it just allows you to have confidence. It doesn't mean that every decision is the right one, but at least, you've got some confidence with the decisions going forward. And then, the process demands that you monitor to ensure that things are going along on the right track. So it's such an empowering process. So.
Oh, totally, yeah. And like you say, so many people probably go through that journey without ever asking those questions, or those, like you say, they're quite personal, and it could be confronting, but probably because they've never looked at it or asked that question.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, that's actually creating, being very clear and actually writing down, what's really important, what you really value, is often the hardest part of holistic management, I think, for a lot of people, because it is a bit confronting. So but
brings in the question, the values. Yeah.
but it's such an important process, because you see people making decisions every day that are not in line with what you would expect.
Oh, and well, that's exactly right. If we were to, and I know Alan talks about this a lot in our overall management, in our governments, in our society, if we were to embrace them with those sorts of values at the heart, then
Yes,
we wouldn't have these massive problems that we are facing at the moment.
Exactly. So much of the day-to-day decisions is purely based on short-term financial outcomes, rather than considering the effects on the environment, and not to mention the effects socially, on the health and well-being of society in general.
Absolutely. No. Wow, powerful stuff. It's amazing how you can go from agriculture and it's just like so intertwined, isn't it?
Cows grazing happily in the paddock.
Yeah. Oh, far out. Very good. Well, I think it's a good time to talk about SmartSoil and Judi Earl and what we're up to. And
Sure.
I guess it'll be cool if people don't know about us. Our goal is to partner with people like Judi and Colin Seiss and all the best minds that embody this compassion for the land and for the animals and the people, and try and spread their knowledge if we can, and amplify their message, and bring our gamut of skill set to the table as well, and try and mix it with this crucial knowledge that we need to get out there as quick as possible, I would say. Because we're running out of time, as Cole said as well. And everyone seems to say, 2030, we're going to do this, 2050, but I think today or yesterday we probably should have started. So that's what we're all about. And we're very excited to have the grazing management principles on the horizon in post-production currently. So we've been out there at Judi's place, a couple of the team members, and had a week out there filming, which was just after the first rain event of the season, or a year or so. Judi, what would you say?
It was a significant rain event towards the end of summer, so it had been sort of chugging along nicely, but that rain that occurred in the early autumn, when just before you guys arrived, was just phenomenal. And that was, if you could say, drought recovery, that sort of rainfall event over a few weeks, really.
Which like you could say, it could be, it could also be a really bad thing if like you say, the ground isn't covered, or it's just running off, because then you're having these flood events. So
exactly.
To see the response from your place, and to know that's possible, it was really it gave us a lot of hope anyway. And Lindsay, the other co-founder of SmartSoil, he loves to say that he likes to bring the rain, so he would have given himself a pat on the back for that one, no doubt.
He did well.
Awesome. So from that, we've been working on the back end to host the information. So Judi's gone really deep into to 10 modules of the course, and it actually incorporates some of this holistic management and some of the goal setting that we've just talked about towards the back end. But I think, would you like to just run us through a little bit about the course, Judi, and where we went with it?
Yeah, for sure, David. Yes, thank you. I guess just to put things in context, I had been thinking about doing something along these lines for some time in terms of, doing an online course, particularly when things slowed down during the COVID break. But given my technological skills, I'm not very tech savvy, and I'm really not that interested in it. So it was very serendipitous to receive the phone call from Lindsay and get the opportunity to work with you guys to develop this program. So it was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. So thank you very much for that. Basically the focus of the course is on grazing management. So as I said, I've been working in the consultancy game for about 20 years, and the focus is very strongly on using grazing livestock to regenerate land. So on that basis, the course is really around the theory of looking at the key components of the grazing ecosystem. So it essentially starts off with a bit of an intro, essentially explaining why I think grasslands are so critically important, not only economically and ecologically, but also socially. So there's a whole raft of reasons why grasslands are so important to our national economy, but also the ecology as well. So it starts off with a bit of an intro in terms of the importance of grasslands, a bit of detail in terms of what I have done here on Glen Orton, and a very brief intro into holistic management. And then I think the unique thing about this particular program is the early modules really focus on those core elements of grazing ecosystems. So there's a module that covers off on plants specifically, how they respond to defoliation, how the intensity and frequency of defoliation impacts plant growth. There's obviously a focus on plant roots and why they're the most important and vulnerable organ of plants. Then the soils module covers off on the key elements of soil health, specifically the biology, the physics, the soil structural elements, soil water, and also a bit of time on the rhizosphere, which is probably the most ecologically important component of the soil. So it really makes that link between plants and photosynthesis and the importance of plants on soil health. And not just plants, but I guess when we're talking about grasslands, specifically grasses, which are really the backbone of grasslands. So there's the theoretical aspects of plants and soils and also animals. So the animal module focuses a little on animal behaviour and grazing behaviour and animal nutrition. And there's a little bit there in terms of having animals that are adapted to your environment. So I think that's really the point of difference between this particular course and other grazing management courses, such as the RCS course or holistic management or any other grazing management course. It really introduces the critical processes that occur in grasslands and why the animal is an equally important part of ensuring landscape and soil health, as well as focusing on soil health and plant production. The animal has got a really good, important role in maintaining that the health of those elements. So from the theoretical, we get into a little bit of a look at the different methods of grazing management and the pros and cons of the different approaches. And there are countless different approaches to grazing management, but looking at the positive and negative effects of different approaches before going into monitoring. And as you might have noticed with the business name, there's a very strong focus on monitoring, because it, my perspective is that it's really critical to be monitoring the health of your natural resources in terms of, pasture growth and soil health. That really is the key to using grazing management successfully to restore landscapes. So there's a module set aside to introduce some pretty simple monitoring techniques, I think, that people can apply. So then we get into the management aspects, looking at planned grazing, and why it's so important to plan the grazing. A lot of people are a bit hesitant about going to the trouble of setting a plan for grazing animals. And to my mind, if you're in the grazing business, it's probably the single most important activity that you can do, to ensure that you're running the right number of animals in terms of the carrying capacity of your property for the maximum length of time. So I always say to people, I think the longest time that I've actually stuck to a grazing plan, having completed it, is 2 weeks. But the thing is, you've got the plan, so you've got then the flexibility to move around within that plan, and having that plan gives you the potential for flexibility, and it gives you so much more control. So, so there's that module on grazing planning, and there's a couple of tools there that that are available on our website, and they're available to anybody that wants to participate in the course. There's also a module on land planning. So in that particular module, we go through the process of actually doing a land plan. And then there's some practical elements in terms of fencing and water, and some demonstrations on what I've actually done here in terms of setting up the infrastructure. So we start with the theoretical and then move into the more practical aspects of management, and essentially, how people can use their resources to get optimal results on their own property. So there's no dogma, there's no recipes. It's all principle based, hence the name of the program is Grazing Management Principles. And the principles apply, in arid or brittle environments just as well as non-brittle environments. They apply here on the tablelands, or in Western Queensland, or in the wet, dry tropics, or down in Victoria. The principles don't change. And that's really the key. So there's, as I said, no recipes. It's just basically trying to improve people's understanding of the key processes, which are universal, and as to the principles of good, sound grazing management.
And it's something I think that's just so important and overseen. Like you say, it flips the whole thing on its head by turning animals into the regenerators if managed correctly, right?
Absolutely.
I like Diana Rogers's thing where she says, "It's not the cow, it's the how," and that's just so true. And I bet it's not just the cow either; it's the human that's managing the cow.
So the cattle, or any sort of, it's applicable to any grazing livestock, really. But yeah, there's certainly a focus on ruminant animals, and particularly cattle. But it's really looking at that interaction between the grazing animal, the plant, and the soil. And the cows or livestock have got a really bad rap in terms of being the cause of land degradation, but it's nothing to do with the animals, and everything to do with the human that's making the decision to either allow them onto or keep them off any area of grasslands.
Absolutely. The monitoring section of that course and how it's coming together, I think, is even if you don't have cows or sheep or any grazing animal, just knowing how to monitor your property and see where your land health is at, invaluable, I feel, and done a really good job of that, I thought, in the course. So
thanks, David. It's just so important, and it gets overlooked. People are out on the land, on their country, almost daily, And it's not a big step to actually, write a few notes and look closely at what's going on under their feet. People are very good at looking at their animals, but not so good at monitoring the soil. So those tools are all pretty, I think, simple to apply. They're not onerous, and it's such an important part of the process.
Absolutely, Judi. Like you say, it's all of it together. Yeah, we're really excited. Let's change gears out of the course, moving out. I'd like to just also, it's not just the course as well. This is the thing that I think gets overlooked. There's so much noise around in this space. It's getting busy, but to know that it's not that it's a whole community of practice as well that's coming together and that we're building. So to have other people that you're learning with, to compare results with, potentially to ask Judi a question down the road once you're on the course or once you've completed the course. That's what it's all about, and I think that's where the real value is going to come for farmers and participants as well down the road. So that's a super exciting thing for us to be able to offer, and to have such a balance between theoretical and practical elements in this course was a big point of difference out of the Colin course also. So in saying that, with the Colin course, we also have some updates coming out later in the year as well. So keep your eyes out for that one, as promised. But yeah, so I'd just like to say, where to from here on the go, Judi? Does the system just keep moving through succession until it gets shrublands and or how does it move, or do you just end up with a prairie like a diverse grassland system that is there year round?
No, well, the nature of the countryside out here, David, is and it's probably why I was able to afford to move here in the first place. But it's not conducive to using machinery on any large scale, unless it's I think a D8 or a D9. I'm not really into machinery, but that's about the level that's required out here. So no, it's there are some areas that there's a few shrubs moving back into, and there's an area that I call Bondi, which is essentially beach sand. It's not particularly productive. So, to my mind, that's the cattle graze there, so they go through there on occasions, probably not as much as some other areas, but I think it's really important to get some impact in those areas. But those, I'm not concerned about maximising productivity from those areas, and the shrubs and the regeneration of trees that's happening out there is just taking its course. Most of the grazing land, the diversity of grasses is significantly changing. There hasn't been any real amount of shrublands or tree regeneration on a lot of the area. One of the attractions of this particular property was that it had something like, I estimated 30 to 35% tree cover anyway. So there's a good amount of timber present, and where the shrubs are coming, at relatively higher density. As I said, it's not highly productive land. To my mind, most of the grasslands are actually a bit devoid of shrub layer. So I'm quite happy for the shrubs to, for an amount of shrubs to be coming in, and the level of increase in population at the moment is certainly not hindering the grass growth. So I'm really happy for to just be focusing on increasing the diversity at any level. So not only the species diversity, but the structural diversity as well. So to my mind, it's all good. But I don't think that the open and more productive grasslands are are looking like they're going to be overtaken by shrubs anytime soon. So, but I think that too is, if that became an issue, then I've always got the option of introducing some sheep, and there's been goats run on the property historically as well. So, there's other ways that rather than mechanical to modify the environment. Again, using grazing management as a tool. Grazing of different species. So there won't be any major works going on to control any outbreaks of shrubs. And yeah, the tree I actually was a bit disappointed that there's a number of trees, particularly on the shallow soil slopes. I lost a lot of trees through the drought, so I'm quite happy for the level of regeneration that's occurring right now to continue. So I think it's a mistake that a lot of people make. They focus on problem species or what they perceive to be problem species. The reality is they don't actually take up much of the grazing land. In many cases, the diversity actually adds to the outcomes in terms of land health. So
absolutely, whether it be through that mycorrhizal interaction or whatever, through those longer periods. So
most of the shrubs that are coming are legumes, so they're acacias, and certainly, as I said, I don't see them as problems, and realistically, mechanically, I'm not in a position to do anything about it. So I'll be looking at again grazing animals if the time comes that I think they're getting a bit too out of control.
No, sensational. Fantastic, Jude. And I look forward to following, the property as it develops, and whether we go through another drought, whether we have the best seasons on offer, we don't know. But that's the importance of these methods that we're talking about, is that it's building this resilience. I mean, the reality is we are facing a changing climate into the future. Conditions are getting tougher. The rainfalls are inconsistent. They either drop all at once or they don't come at all. So, building that resilience in your landscape, like you've managed to do, is just can't explain or empower how important that is. It's
absolutely
imperative. Well, I guess some closing notes then. I'm pretty happy. Are you happy with how our combo's gone today, Jude?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah, good as gold.
Yeah, bloody oath. And it's bloody good to catch up with you. It's been a good couple of weeks since I've seen you. So and for even just looking at all the modules and going through the work to hear a bit more of your personal story and how it started is a really good way, I think, to just introduce you to more people. You talked about in the groups with all the big dogs. It's amazing that we've always found that everyone knows each other. It's
the way.
Yeah, so we're really excited to be able to amplify your message, and just so grateful to be working with a lady like yourself. So thank you.
Thank you, David.
Legend.
Very good.
Nice one. Well, we'll wrap it up. For more information on SmartSoil, you can head over to SmartSoil EDU. You'll also be able to sign up to our mailing list at the bottom of this webinar. And from there, if you're on that mailing list, you may be the first to know when Judi's course goes live. So really looking forward to it, and more to come soon, I hope.